Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Friday. This is Seattle Now. This week, former Seattle City Councilmember Kshama Sawant is back in the game. This time, she's running for Congress. Public media, including stations like KUOW, are facing a funding threat from the Trump administration. And acclaimed restaurant Canlis has a new executive chef. Big news, he's local. Freelance science journalist Jane C. Hu and South Seattle Emerald founder Marcus Harrison Green are here to break down the week. But first, let's get you caught up. A federal judge has ruled that the Trump administration must restore hundreds of millions of dollars in AmeriCorps funding and reinstate volunteers if they're willing and able to return. The lawsuit was filed by multiple states, including Washington, after the federal government canceled grants that had already been approved by Congress. According to AmeriCorps, the agency deploys more than 9,000 volunteers in Washington. Transit note, if you're planning to take light rail this weekend, Sound Transit is closing 5 stations in the downtown core, stretching from Westlake to Stadium. The closures begin Saturday night at 10 p.m. They'll reopen early Monday morning. During that time, the agency is doing electrical and software testing. A shuttle bus will carry passengers between Capitol Hill and Soto stations every 15 minutes. And if you're still making weekend plans, Washington State parks are free this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. That means you don't need a Discover Pass or to pay for parking on site. And it's the unofficial kickoff of Pride Month in Seattle, with Pride in the Park on Saturday. It starts at noon at Volunteer Park. There'll be live music, drag performances, food trucks, and a beer garden. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. It's Friday again. Pull out the plastic wading pool, you two. It finally feels like summer. Jane C. Hu is here. She's a freelance science journalist. Jane, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, don't ask. We'll get into it. Marcus Harrison Green is here. He's the founder of the South Seattle Emerald and a columnist at The Stranger. Nice to see you, Marcus.
Great to see you, Trish. I am here and I am functional.
Yeah, glad you're back. All right, a big shift in the Seattle culinary scene. Acclaimed restaurant Canlis has a new executive chef. James Huffman is taking the job. He's a local guy. He's from Seattle, only ever worked in the Seattle area. He's also been working at Canlis for the last 9 years. This is a different move for the acclaimed restaurant. Huffman is the first ever executive chef at Canlis to actually be from Seattle. He told the Seattle Times he feels a bit like the hometown kid playing quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. Canlis is the kind of place where you go for a special occasion, at least in my world. They've made a pretty big deal about the previous chefs they've recruited for the job. What does it say, you two, that they made the choice to hire a Seattle-born chef from within the restaurant?
I'm into it. I feel like it's a real chance to try and showcase what makes Seattle, Seattle. I really liked during lockdown when Canlis was really going out of their way to be more accessible. I still personally have not been there, unfortunately.
Same. Honestly, you've never eaten. Wait a minute. That's not true. I had the day after I got married. We went and had a meal at Canlis.
See, that seems like the kind of occasion worth celebrating,
exactly.
Right?
That was 20 years ago.
That's when you last could afford potentially eating at
well,
Canlis.
I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, it is a special occasion place.
I love that they're, making it relevant to the city by having, somebody from the city actually there. Now, if they would just match the minimum wage that we are paid in the city, that would make it even more accessible. I mean, I wasn't Canlis, but I've, taken my father for Father's Day out to the Metropolitan Grill. And I got to tell you, it's like I have to sell a kidney or stop paying my insurance premiums to be able to afford it. My goodness.
Well, Marcus, to be fair, they do come over with flashlights to show you your steak.
That is very true. It's very true. It's an add-on, I suppose. It's a surcharge, but yes.
If you want that level of service, Marcus, you have to pay for it. The Times says Huffman has changed almost 90% of the menu, but don't worry, he's keeping the salad. He says his local roots are influencing his approach. His biggest goal at Canlis, and this is a quote, is sourcing and supporting local producers and farmers and pushing forward the idea of Pacific Northwest cuisine. I feel like that's a little bit of a required statement from chefs in the Pacific Northwest, even if it's true.
Yeah, that felt boilerplate, I gotta say.
That's like the Shutterstock.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't blame him if he's like, I'm still trying to figure out what it is I want to do. So I'll just say this.
Yes. And I have to say, to add on to that, I mean, he talked about being the QB for the Seahawks potentially. I mean, that might have been a Freudian slip in some ways. The QBs have lately in this town have been kind of maligned. So I'm hopeful that, that doesn't happen with him, maybe.
All right. Either way, let's give Huffman a chance here. Good luck, man. Good job keeping the salad. All right. On to the big story of the week. Love her or hate her. She is Seattle's most notable socialist. Former Seattle Councilmember Kshama Sawant announced this week she's running as an independent socialist in the 2026 race for Washington's 9th congressional district. As a reminder, that district includes some of Seattle, Bellevue, Tukwila, SeaTac. I think that's about it, maybe a little bit more in there. Sawant told supporters she's challenging Adam Smith because of his response to the war in Gaza. She left the city council at the start of 2024 after winning 3 elections and narrowly surviving a recall campaign. I'll put this out to the both of you. When you think of Sawant's place in Seattle politics, what comes to mind? Marcus, go first.
A lot of righteous fury, I guess, and, the fact that the K is silent. And, a lot of people still don't know that.
Kshama. Don't call her Kshama. I know it.
No, I was actually there at the press conference on Monday. I was covering it for The Stranger. And I was a little surprised. I thought that, I'd seen her in City Hall, making cameos and so forth. Very much flashbacks to 2014, 2015 when she first came on at City Hall. And so I thought maybe that she would be announcing a run for city council again, particularly with the, all of the, shall we say, attrition that we're having.
Attrition, that's fair.
I mean, I feel like her political career has exactly overlapped with the time that I've lived in Seattle. So in a lot of ways, I feel like her tenure has kind of defined my time here in following Seattle politics. I associate her most with $15 minimum wage and just generally starting conversations around town that people feel uncomfortable having, such as what is socialism, period.
Yeah.
But
I still don't actually know.
Well, she's consistent, so pay attention.
But she has, but to your point, Jane, in all seriousness, right? I mean, she has expanded the Overton window on what is acceptable to talk about. And I think particularly now when you have a Democratic Party that, at least the last poll that I saw, I think it was on The Hill or Axios, one of those where it only has 36% favorable rating. That's somewhere near where the Republicans are at this point in terms of national polls. I think, I think the conversation is to be had on, what is the future of the left in this country? And you have Adam Smith, who is a 15-term congressman versus, this upstart, at least in terms of congressionally, with Kshama Sawant. And I think you're going to see what is sort of playing out nationally in the fact that you have folks who are maybe a bit tired of the establishment Democrats, and you want some folks who are actually going to fight on the left, at least as they see fit.
Smith says he's looking forward to the challenge. He says the election will offer a clear contrast. Do you want to see a debate between these two?
Oh, my God.
I would pay to see a debate, actually.
I got to say, as somebody who has covered Adam Smith, being at the South Seattle, and he is, the congressman of the South End and Skyway and so forth.
Yeah.
He's not somebody you would categorize as warm and fuzzy.
No, not at all.
I remember this was 6 years ago when Sarah Smith was running against him. No relation, but she was also running from his left. And I remember he, on the record, was like, she is the worst candidate I've ever had to run against ever,
man.
right? So, I mean, hold on to your horses, right? I mean, with Sawant, I think this will be like verbal dynamite that they're lobbing at each other, for the next 2 years, which, as a reporter, I can't wait.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good for copy.
I got my popcorn.
And Democrats are pissed at Smith, right? They're mad that he's gone rogue against the party.
Well, he's definitely, there was a New Yorker article that ran, I want to say it was either in January or February, talked about him sort of not cozying up is maybe too strong, but maybe being open to Chris Rufo, the guy who has been sort of an anti-woke activist. Adam Smith saying essentially that it was the left woke that essentially torpedoed the Democratic candidate in this last election. So That being said, I don't know what Kamala Harris said that was woke other than she was black and a woman that torpedoed her election. So, I mean, but
I'm really curious how this will play out. I do think it is going to be kind of a litmus test for where folks are feeling, where they want to see the left go right now. Because on the one hand, I can kind of see in this time of instability and just general turmoil in the government, folks wanting to just be more conservative and be like, all right, we'll go with this guy for the 16th time.
Right.
We know who he is.
if it ain't broke.
Right. Well, even if it's a little broke, like maybe we don't really want to change horses in the middle of the stream, right? Like maybe I can see folks thinking that. But on the other hand, I can see plenty of folks being like, well, with all this instability, why not just blow it all up and go with someone completely different and see what happens?
Well, and to your point about Sawant saying things that most people won't say in politics, right? Sawant spent 2024 campaigning across the U.S., urging young voters not to vote for Kamala Harris due to her stance on the war in Gaza. As we talked about on the show this week, she's made appearances at Seattle City Council meetings a few times, getting everybody riled up, driving the council into the back room.
I saw her at Trader Joe's the other day, too. She was getting some hummus. So.
Sawant says she'll be running as an independent socialist, something she did in her runs for city council and was seen as, to your point, as sort of a trailblazing move more than a decade ago, Jane. I mentioned that Sawant is consistent. That is notable. Is it an advantage here? Will it help her?
She at least has name recognition with most Seattleites, right? Like, I guess the other thing that I'm curious to see how this plays out is how much people are actually going to be following this. I sense a lot of just general fatigue in following politics and news right now. And I feel like, the fact that you two can recognize former or current council members at the grocery store puts you in
we're in a special category of council watching, at the same time.
Yes. I would wager that the majority of folks who will be voting in this election could not do that, right? And therefore would not know the ins and outs of what's been going on this election cycle, let alone the last 10 years. And especially with folks new to town, I'll just be really interested to see how this all plays out.
Yeah. I wonder if a more centrist Democrat who's blaming the far left, Smith, versus Kshama Sawant is going to be a runaway victory.
Yeah, I think it will provide sort of a bellwether, or at least I think national pundits will call this sort of a bellwether of, quote unquote, the future of the left. And so that being said, we don't vote until November 2026.
So many words
it's
in
a while
between
away.
here and there. So many words. Danny Westneat says he's calling it early, that she's not going to do well. So
I know one of Westneat's arguments was that she's running as an independent and that
was
an
a
independent
mistake,
has never won. Right. I feel like for some voters that would be a plus. I mean, I'm thinking about my dad, who has been a registered Democrat for most of his life, and a few years ago, I think unregistered and has become an independent.
Right.
And I think he's just become very disillusioned with how the two-party system is working. And I would expect that out of any place in the country, there might be a high percentage of people in Seattle who feel that way as well.
We are certainly in unprecedented times. All right, moving on to our next topic. It has been a rough week for public media as President Donald Trump formally asked Congress to take back $1.1 billion it's set aside for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which includes PBS, NPR, and member stations like KUOW. A rescission request only takes a simple majority, which Republicans have in both the House and Senate. They have about 40 days from Friday to make this decision. If this rescission package passes, local public media stations across the country will lose critical support that they are counting on very quickly. What does public media mean to you?
I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street. I rely on NPR and member stations for my news. I feel strongly that this is the backbone of keeping America educated and connected. And I didn't know the word rescission before all of this happened, and I'm mad that I have to know that word now.
Yeah, same.
Marcus, you grew up on public media?
Somewhat, right? I mean, I used to watch Sesame Street.
Capital I.
Yeah. R for rescission, right?
R for rescission. Today's show brought to you by R for rescission.
No, but I mean, in all seriousness, right? I mean, I think for me, media in general, but certainly public media, it's the great leveler of power, right? I mean, it, at least in terms of its aspiration, right? It's supposed to and often does put, the rich on the same level as those who are poor, that, the meek on the same level as the strong and so forth. And so I look at this as it's an attack on a very vital public institution that at this point, I have to agree with Pramila Jayapal, the congresswoman who said, we should be increasing funding to public media, not taking away.
I feel like at this point I have to say that we did not coach you on these answers.
We do kind of have self-interest, all of us.
Well, we can get to that.
I think we have self-interest in the sense of, we want to have an educated, informed populace. And I feel like public radio is a huge part of that. In the short term, I'm angry and concerned about friends of mine who might lose jobs. Yeah. And I, of course, want to be able to keep consuming the news in the way that I do. But in the long term, I'm really concerned that not funding these institutions is just going to lead to a long-term void in how people get their information. What is left if you take this away?
You're saying X isn't a one-to-one replacement?
Man.
Or TikTok. So I met a nice man in the woods a couple weekends ago when I was backpacking. Mm-hmm. And he was essentially like, I get all of my news from TikTok now because we don't have to deal with those pesky news editors.
Oh, my God.
Oh, gosh.
And I was horrified, but it was also interested to hear from someone who had no idea what I did as a job and who just was speaking genuinely about how they feel about and where they get their news. I feel like that's going to be more and more people. If you take away the option of getting your news from public media, I mean, you are leaving people with only that, right?
Well, and it's not just us, right? We've spent the past few months doing stories about all kinds of researchers and organizations, nonprofits with funding on the ropes right now. And now here we are talking about our funding being on the ropes. And Marcus, I know you get this. You founded a media organization in the South Seattle Emerald and your publishing company, Hinton. You've had to do more than your fair share of fundraising. Yeah,
well, I mean, and that's, I think, the issue, right, is that when truth sort of becomes a commodity or truth becomes something you have to crowdfund for, then, I mean, where do we stand as a society, right? Where do we stand, just even as a universal community, right? And so, look, I mean, yes, I'm saying this on a partially publicly funded station. That being said, we do need, I mean, it is a vital consequence that we fund media. Even, whether it's NPR, whether it's PBS, whether it's the Emerald and our other publications. It is the vegetables of life in the sense of, many times the truth isn't entertaining. The truth doesn't owe us any comfort. It just owes us the truth itself.
This is not the first time public media has been under fire in Congress. Cuts to CPB funding have been proposed in other congressional budgets. Way back in 1969, Mr. Rogers famously appeared in front of lawmakers to fight cuts to public media proposed by President Nixon. Nixon.
My goodness.
That's the first guy who tried to kill public media. That guy.
Of course.
Mr. Rogers actually got political? Wow.
Yeah, and he swayed opinions. It was a really important moment for public media.
Interesting.
Yeah. NPR and PBS have dealt with these allegations of partisan bias for a long time, even pre-Trump. CPB funding is often brought up.
Yeah, I remember Mitt Romney, I want to say, when he was running in 2012
I remember, yes.
Against President Obama, he said he was going to cut Big Bird. And,
I remember.
I had blocked that out of my memory until this moment.
Yeah.
Simpler days.
Well, as you mentioned, Washington's congressional delegation has public media's back. Representative Pramila Jayapal calls it an essential public good. We should increase the funding, she says, not cut it. Senator Patty Murray classified Trump's move as a way to settle political scores and muzzle the free press.
Yeah, and I'll say this, this hasn't always been partisan in the sense that, I remember John McCain, the late senator from Arizona, he had said once, I think he was speaking on one of the morning shows, and he said, I absolutely hate the media, but we also absolutely need the media, right? I mean, he knew even then, he sort of understood the consequences of, what it is when you don't have a media keeping power account.
Is there a better way to fund public media? I mean, we are in unprecedented times. This could legitimately go away.
If anyone has the answer, please speak up now, because I feel like everyone is trying the same things that we always try, and everyone's passing around the same $20.
Yeah.
And all of the folks who want to support this, we're not the folks with the power and the money for the most part, because we've gone into this as our profession. I mean, I've often thought about, I thought, Marcus, you put it really well, talking about equating this to kind of your vegetables. People will always choose the candy over vegetables for the most part, at least in the short term. But we really should be funding media as a public utility. Like, you need the media, and I think people don't realize the utility of it, and I fear that they won't until it is gone.
Here is the truth. Small local television and radio stations cannot survive without this CPB money. And that is just news. That's not just news in Sesame Street. It is actually hyper-local public service emergency information, critical communications that need to occur. And we don't have to hit this too hard, but there are places even here in Washington where public media is the only source for certain things. So before we move on, charitable contributions are a private affair, but public media is important for everyone. So how much can I put you two down for today?
I donated my car to KUOW.
What?
Like 5 years ago.
You get a T-shirt now. Now you get a T-shirt.
A sense of pride in supporting something that I care deeply about.
I pay my secular tithes to KUOW.
Funny thing about the car donation, there are some legit people who think that is a donation that is going to like the reporters so they can get to their assignments.
Oh, that's
really?
so funny.
Some people actually thought
that's not what it's going towards. Wow.
You're not driving.
You're
not driving my '98 Volvo around like that.
Well.
All right. One last thing before we go. Well, it's probably a good time for a vacation, it sounds like. Things are changing at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Don't call it SeaTac for short. They don't like that.
It's always going to be ST to me.
I was not aware that we were in a campaign of not saying SeaTac anymore.
Well, it's not our campaign, it's theirs.
That makes me want to say it even more.
I know. Like, we can't have nice things.
Call it SEA. The airport and Alaska Airlines are working to add more direct international flights. Alaska Airlines announced this week it's launching nonstop service to Rome. That's the third intercontinental destination announced by Alaska within the past year after Tokyo and Seoul. Am I desperate because this feels exciting?
Not at all. I mean, particularly with some of the, shall we say, the other travel news that has been going on recently. It's good to have some good travel news. Mm-hmm. And this is and what, directly to Rome? That means we can, in Seattle, we can actually fly to a place that knows how to make pizza. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking the opposite, which is if people from Rome are going to come here.
We better get our pizza game together?
Yeah. Or do they want to well, I don't know about immigrating to the U.S. right now. If I didn't already live here, I don't know that I'd want to. But, hey, you guys want to come make some pizza here? Like that.
You could go check out the Pope, the new American Pope.
Oh,
that
right.
is true.
Alaska says Rome was among their most requested European destinations, and they're considering adding nonstop flights to Paris and Berlin. But be real with me for a second here. Was the layover the thing stopping you from going to Rome or Berlin?
I do feel like having the direct flight, I'm a big fan of direct flights.
Same.
So it does make it easier. I guess the question is going to be, what is the cost?
We'll check the rates. We'll see. We'll be saving. It's Canlis or a flight to Rome. We're going to leave it there. Jane Sehu is a freelance science journalist. Marcus Harrison Green is the founder of the South Seattle Emerald. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Marcus.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Jane.
Thanks for having me again.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.